Hello, my name is Aoudi, and this lesson titled Cross-Site Scripting or XSS is part of the Web Application Security video series. For this lesson, related resources, and the full course, you can access my website at samaraudi.com. This is not going to be a PowerPoint-based lesson. Instead, it's going to be hands-on. I will demonstrate practical activities. And however, before we start, I'd like to point out that if you really want to do these activities, there are some prerequisites. So a quick recap. There was a video lesson associated with chapter 1 where I covered the basic prerequisite knowledge required to do the security part of the course. And most importantly, we had some practical demonstration and activities. Basically, we created a website. Let me just show you very quickly. This was the third practical task where we created our first website. So if you want to follow with me and do the practical activities of chapter 3 or the cross-site scripting chapter, you really need the Vertigo server. It's a server bundle that includes PHP as a server-side programming language, MySQL as a database management system, and the web server is Apache. So we already created that and created our first website. Okay, so let me just show you again. If you remember, I'm using a virtual machine here. You don't have to, but I prefer to do that. And my server here, that's the icon. I run it, and to make sure it's running, you should have this plus, the green plus icon here. And to access server options, you can click it. For example, if I want to go to the server folder, this is it. Okay. Now this is the second lesson in the course, second video lesson, I should say, but it is associated with the third chapter. I simply didn't see the need to create a video lesson for chapter 2. Instead, I'll go very quickly over some of the important topics in chapter 2 right now, and then we can move on and start with our chapter 3. Okay, so chapter 2 is titled Web Application Security Problem, and in it I highlight the major security problems in web application. First of all, if you remember, we said security is a concern online for both users and website owners. That's number one. But I'd like to mention that recent studies show that although organizations spend most of their security investments on the conventional and existing infrastructure, they don't spend as much money on web application. However, most of the attacks take place through their websites and web applications rather than directly on their infrastructure. So there's a bit of mismatch and perhaps misunderstanding. Your conventional security tools and methods are not going to protect your web application. So you can say I have firewall and IDS or IPS. That's not going to work because simply your firewall is configured to allow web traffic, whether through port 80 on HTTP or 443 HTTPS. So instead of saying I have security measures in place, you have to design and build security into your web application itself, as I will highlight throughout this entire course. We also said that the website itself can be a tool that can be used to administer attacks and, for example, against unsuspected users, or it can be a target where the attacker would target a website or a web application for a specific company. Of course, there are major implications when there's a security breach online. As users, for example, we could face financial theft or even identity theft, and as organizations, the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of our information resources will be compromised. There are really very good resources online, and I base my course mostly on two organizations that provide guidelines and information on web application security. The main one is OWASP, and the second one is WASP. Both of them are not-for-profit organizations, and they have really excellent resources. So all the links are available on this chapter's page. So the main vulnerabilities that I will be covering in the course are based on the OWASP top 10, and the most recent list as of today is the 2013 list, but I will not be covering them in order, or as you see here, for example, they are in order of severity, A1, A2, A3. So my first vulnerability covered in this course is cross-site scripting. So notice here A1 is injection, which according to OWASP, it includes things like LDAP injection and SQL injection. But the way I will discuss cross-site scripting, as you will see now, so perhaps we can get started. I categorize it under something called injection flows. So let's start with that. All right, so I have created here a website which is available on my server, which is on my virtual machine. That's the IP address of the virtual machine, and that is the document path of my website. So let me just go very quickly to this page. You know, some pages have forms, and these forms is basically where the users can enter some valid input. They're searching for something, they're registering, they're logging in. Most users would provide valid input. However, an attacker would use this input mechanism called the form to inject code. That code can be SQL code or SQL code, it can be JavaScript or scripting in general, and so on. So if a website allows the injection of code, I call it an injection flow in general. So under injection flow, then we can have the OWASP A1, which is SQL injection, for instance. I also think that cross-site scripting belongs to this category because it involves some injection. So again, injection flow is when an attacker would inject code instead of valid input into the web server. Okay, so let me go ahead and explain what XSS is. XSS stands for cross-site scripting, and basically it's an injection-based flow where an attacker would enter malicious code instead of valid input into the web server, and then that web server replays this JavaScript or this code back into the browsers of unsuspecting users. So again, when the malicious code is in the form of scripting, more specifically JavaScript, then we're talking about cross-site scripting. So this big picture here that you see in front of you involves three steps. Number one, attacker injecting code into a server. Number two, the server allowing that. And then number three, replaying it back to the browsers of unsuspecting users. So there are different types of XSS. This is what we call a client XSS, as in it starts with the attacker using his or her browser to inject the code into the server. So we start here at step one. There's also server XSS. This is where the server, the web server, is a malicious website owned by the attacker, and then the attacker doesn't really have to go through the attacking process from number one. They can simply create web pages that includes the XSS code. So we start here somewhere in the middle rather than here. And again, when people are tricked into visiting these fake or malicious websites, they get the XSS code. Also, I'm going to point out specifically during the demos that XSS can be either reflected, that means it's not stored on the data on the server, on the database, but rather echoed back to the browser, versus stored where the XSS code is stored or saved on the database. So I'm going to point that out during the demo. So the underlying technology for XSS is a client-side, mostly scripting language, and the most popular is JavaScript. So you should have the basic understanding of how JavaScript works. JavaScript is a client-side scripting language, and it operates within the browser. That's what it means, client-side. So when we get a web page that involves JavaScript, then we will be able to see the JavaScript inside that page. The script itself can be written inside the web page itself, as you see here, and it can be written in a file, and simply within the web page I point to that file. So in this case I have here a file called mycode.js. In that file, for example, I can do exactly what I did here, which is just the alert function, as you will see it very shortly. So again, you should be familiar with this, the basics of JavaScript and how we use it within our web pages. So in the remaining part of this lesson, I show you different techniques and attacks in XSS, which I will demonstrate. So I'm not gonna read any of that stuff here. Instead, we will do a demo. And the last part is preventing, I should fix this, so preventing XSS rather than preventing in XSS. So the main thing that you should understand, and that I will demo very shortly, is that if we go back here to this picture, we said there are two things. So I am injecting code, and the code is being echoed back to the browser. So prevention involves two things: cleaning up or preventing that code from coming into the server, and then if it made its way to the server, then I should clean it on the way out of the server. And this is what we call, so for incoming code, I'm gonna need something called input validation. So that's the input being provided by the user, and with that I can use the positive model, which uses a white list of what's acceptable, reject everything else. Very secure. It might affect usability, and you might have some false positives in this case, where you reject valid input. For example, I can say I'm gonna allow only English alphabet. So if there's a number, the number might not be bad or malicious, but I'm rejecting it anyway. In a negative model is more usable but less secure. I create a blacklist of unacceptable input and I allow everything else. Well, this is good, but it protects me against what I know now, not against something that I have no idea, which is not in my blacklist. And the second part of prevention or protection is basically to encode the output so that rather than the code being executed or run on the web server, I'm gonna simply display it. So take a look here. This is actual code and the web browser understands this code. However, it didn't really execute it. It didn't do what it's supposed to do with it. For example, an alert function will display that alert pop-up message. I don't see it, even though it's written on this page. Well, simply because if I look here on the source, because I have that. So view source, if I look here, so all of that is code being executed and I see that web page in front of you. But that particular part, as you see here, I'm using what we call encoding. This is HTML entity encoding, where the LT ampersand LT semicolon simply represents this less than. So when a web application or a website encodes output, you're protecting the user from having the code being executed on their browser. Okay, enough theory. Let's go ahead and move to the practical part. Let me close this. All right, so like I said, I created a few web pages to demonstrate cross-site scripting. Before I start, we said most of the time the injection comes through forms. This is how I interact with the web page, but sometimes it can be through URL parameters. So if I go here and see, for example, again, this is from chapter 1 where we covered the URL, and we said that if there is this question mark, that's the beginning of a query. That's a query parameter equal ENG, that's the value. So the web page is reading those values. So if I change here, for example, and I say USA, you will see here that the page read that. So again, this is a place where an attacker may inject code. So we'll start with form-based injection. So I created this page that has a search text box, but to make it clearer, I created this text area so that you can see the code that I am injecting. Let me make this a little bit bigger. Yeah, this should be clear. Okay, so we said XSS can be reflected and it can be stored. Reflected is basically what I will show you right here. Let's start with the very basic. Before we even start with XSS, sorry, I'm gonna start with something very simple. I'm gonna just write my name here, and you see here in the results I see my name. So I'm gonna test that. We always do the testing by poking the application and to see if it has any weakness. So this is not XSS, this is HTML, and basically it's a heading 1 tag, and you see here what happened. So it looks like this website is allowing me to put code. I can even try to put an image. For example, if I have let me see the location of this image. So I'm gonna copy this, go back here. If you remember, we said an image looks like this. Okay, so the source of the image can be somewhere online, for example, the attacker's website. And as you see here, that's the image. I injected it here from my website. Now again, notice this is the IP address of my virtual machine, and this is therefore right here on my computer. Okay, so let's do now, all of this is just injection but not script yet. So if you remember, we need the script element, and I'm gonna go ahead and copy that. I'll be using it a lot, and I will do a simple alert. So this is alert. So what happened is I sent the code, it went to the server reflected it back or echoed it back in this results page, and I was able to see my own code being executed on my page. Now you might say, okay, well, how would that affect other people? Well, the stored XSS is the one that might affect other users, because it gets stored on the server and then it comes back to any user who's accessing this page. Think of it as a Facebook page where you post something, and anybody who's visiting, let's say your friends, and they see your post. If your post contains that code, then all the people accessing the page will be able to see that code or the effect of that code being executed. Okay, so before we go to XSS, I'm gonna just show you a couple of techniques here. Let's say sometimes we visit website and these pop-ups start to come. They are very annoying. So, oops, I should have kept that. There it is. To make things faster, I'm gonna open Notepad and I'm gonna put few things in case I need them later. Okay, so again, what I want to do is open a new window for some website. So I'm gonna use the window.open, and basically in here I'm gonna put the website that I want to open. So let's say google.com. Okay, and let me copy that. Okay, so there is the Google website. It opened here. I'm gonna close it. Let's do something more interesting with this. I'm gonna put a loop. I'm not going to put an infinite loop because that's gonna be really disruptive. So instead I'm gonna put a loop that runs from let's say 3 times. So it's a for loop. So for I equals 0, what did I do? It's okay, semicolon, I less than 3, and I incremented. Okay, then I see, that's the autocorrect. Do this, close the for loop. So the for loop says start at 0 and continue as long as it's less than 3. So let's copy this. So there you go, 0, 1, 2, which means 3 instances. So you can do an infinite loop here and create some havoc for the users. Okay, it's not that I'm saying you should do that, I'm just saying that the attackers would do that. Okay, be nice. Alright, next I'm gonna do something a little bit similar but more subtle. Instead of having a pop-up, I'm gonna redirect you to another page. So let's say an attacker creates, you're accessing your favorite website, whatever it is, Facebook, bank, etc., and the attacker managed to create a web page that have the look and feel of your bank's web page, but to get you to go there, he needs to redirect you. So to do that, I'm gonna get here this guy. So the window.open will open a new tab or window, but the document.location, so let me put this here, document.location, and the href of it is equal to whatever you want. So basically here I'm gonna say HTTP actually I'm gonna use my website, why not? Okay, so let me make sure document.location.href is equal to the location that you're interested in, and let me put this here. Okay. Alright, so it's the same web page, as you notice, that didn't open a new one, and it took me to redirected me to another web page. Okay, so what else can we do? We can do, I think, in this page here, I gave some examples. Let me just remember. Oh, the browser refresh, so we can do that. The browser refresh basically uses the meta tag. The meta tag is an HTML tag. It's not really JavaScript, and it belongs to the head section of your web page. So it's really not going to work if I do it here, but this is, let me write it here. So that's the meta tag, and basically, okay, so it belongs to the head section of your web page. Let me see if I have any here just to show you. There it is. That's the meta tag. Okay, let me close this. All right, so the meta element or tag has something called HTTP equiv. Okay, and depending on the value that you give it, I'm gonna say refresh, the content becomes associated with it. So if it's a refresh, then the content refers to the refresh is equal to, and I'm gonna say here 0. So let me go ahead and copy this. Okay. I turned on the warnings on my server, so basically nothing happened. But let me try it to do the same thing here in the URL. Okay, here we go. It looks like Internet Explorer tried to prevent it, detected that it's cross-site scripting, and it tried to prevent it. So how about we try it in Firefox? So I'm gonna come here, copy all of this. Okay, which is nice because I didn't want really that infinite refresh. So as you see, this is an infinite refresh here, so it's gonna refresh every 0 seconds, so it's gonna keep on refreshing. So look here, I'm clicking these links, nothing is happening. If there's scroll in the page, you cannot scroll. So basically, this is a denial of service on that web page. Again, if it's stored, and anybody who accesses that page, it's gonna be they're gonna be affected by it. Okay, enough with the infinite refresh. Let's do something a little bit more sinister. Okay, so I'm gonna show you how we display cookie information. So if I say here document.cookie, let me just put it here. Document.cookie gets you the cookie and basically some session information and anything saved in the cookie. To display it, I will use the alert. Okay, and let me save this. Okay, as you see here, I have the session token, that's very dangerous information right there, the session ID, and I have some session variable that I created randomly just to show you. So basically all this information is now visible, but this is my own stuff. It's not like it's somebody else's. So as it is now, it doesn't really pose any threat yet. So let me go ahead and save this, and let me go back and do something a little bit more interesting with it. Okay, so let's start by defining a variable, and I'm gonna call it victim. As you see, I'm very creative. I'm gonna put in it the cookie. Okay, so now that variable called victim has the cookie information in it. I don't need this alert anymore. Okay, I'm gonna use another variable called my link. As you see, I'm really creative with my namings. I'm gonna use the DOM model, the document, which is my web page, and use this get elements by tag name. So let me make sure I wrote it correctly. This is camel case. We always start with lowercase, then every new word becomes in general in case you forget. So if you're doing get elements by ID and so on. So here I'm using this function to get the A element in my document. If you remember, the A element is the one that creates a hyperlink. So this hyperlink, for example, here is a href, as you see. And as you see here, I have a lot of A's in my web page. They're ordered in an array that starts 0, 1, 2, 3. So the first one is 0. That's why I will use 0 now. So that's another semicolon. I have my two variables. Now I'm going to use my link, the variable that I created, which now has all the A's, right? I want the first one. So my link 0.href okay, and it's gonna be equal to something. What is that thing? This is basically my evil page where I am waiting for an input from that page. I'm the attacker. This is my page, and if the victim clicks it, I'm gonna send to my page their cookie information. So conveniently enough, I created a PHP page called xssevil.php, and that page is waiting for a parameter. Remember, I just showed you parameters. So let me just open this to remind you. This is a parameter called country. The value is UAE. This is a parameter called lang. The value is ing. And in my evil page, I have a parameter called precious. Okay, and it's gonna equal to whatever is in the victim variable. I think in here, if you remember, I showed you how to do that, and I said cookie equal victim just to keep it simple. And I said this needs a little tweaking, and this is the tweaking that I'm talking about. So if I write victim, it will actually, let me show you. Let me go ahead and write victim. And let me copy this. Okay. Now, notice what will happen here. If I put the mouse over home, this is gonna be, it's all in all my pages. So this is going to be the first link in the page, which is my link 0. So this is the one that will change. If you notice here below, when I put the mouse over it, it's going to index.php, right? So nothing happened, right? Well, it did happen. Let me put the mouse over this. Now take a look here, okay? Now it's not index.php, it's that XSS evil precious equal victim. So victim, that's all I got, the word victim, and that's not really what I wanted to do. So let me go back, and again I'm gonna go back and just do nothing just to show you. Put the mouse over here, that's the index page, right? So this is without that link injection. So this is called link injection. I'm actually changing the value of the link. But now victim is wrong. Instead, I'm gonna use the dot notation. So to add something, I'm gonna use the concat function, concat, and inside it, victim. So basically, I'm concatenating what's inside victim to this string here, and basically this, I think, should do the job. If I didn't make any mistake, let's try again. Let's put the mouse here, take a look at, yep. So basically, if the user clicked that link, they went to my website. Of course, I'm not going in my website, I'm not going to show them, hey, look what I can do. I'm gonna save it in my own list and use it later to do some damage. Okay, now one more thing I want to show you is the stored XSS. So all of this has been reflected, okay? So the stored one, basically it means that I'm gonna go back to the best one to do is the alert. Yeah, we can do the alert. Now take a look, this is the page where it's stored. So I'm gonna copy the URL, okay? And I'm gonna close it. And I'm gonna open it again. And Voila. Again, these are the warnings I turned on as a developer. I want to see if they have any problem. So basically, what happened is I came to this page without any injection that took place right now. The injection is already saved in the database. So anybody visiting this page, they're gonna see these. So if I go back here and I type something, so I'm a normal user and I'm simply going to that page, this was injected before, this is the demo I just did, and this is me injecting something. So again, this is an example of stored XSS. Okay, so almost done here. The last thing I want to do is prevention. So I want to show you, if you see here in this page, I say for a protected version of the web page, only client-side protection, visit this. So I'm gonna go ahead, this is another version of the same web page. And what I did here, I applied client-side protection. That means I wrote something here that I can see on my web page that does some input validation. Let me show you what I've done. It's really simple. I use the pattern attribute and I said allow only English alphabet A to Z lowercase, white space, any number of those. And if you make a mistake, this is what you see, and this is a required field. So if I try to do this, this is a required field. If I try to do injection script alert script, it's not gonna like it. You must use English alphabet, so I cannot really, this is fine, but if I put this, it's not fine. If I put this, it's not fine. If I put this, so none of that is okay. However, an attacker can easily bypass this. You can use a tamper tool. So after the request leaves the page, so I enter something valid, hit enter or search, and it will leave the page, it will leave the protection. I can make the changes then. So using a tool like tamper IE, for example, I can do that very easily. Another technique, I can save this page locally. I can save it here, and let me save it on my desktop. I'm gonna save it as .html. Yep, there it is. So it actually saved with it. You see client side, so it got me the style and the picture. So if I open it, you see this is a local file now, and it still has the protection in it. Okay, so what I will do, I will right click here, open with Notepad, go to where the protection is. I'm looking for, there it is. I'm gonna remove required. I'm gonna remove this title. I'm gonna remove the pattern. This is the protection right here. I'm gonna remove it. I can do that. It's on my computer. Okay, but let's see. There's still a problem here. I'm gonna show it to you. Open this. Refresh. Okay, you see the red is gone. However, nothing's gonna happen when I click the search button, simply because I'll show you. The action is what happens when you click something. So basically this is not the right, I don't have anything on my desktop called XSS results client. I have it on the server. So this is the server. So I can get this and I can do that. Okay, save, and now search. Did I refresh? I think I did. There you go. So from my local page, I send a request to the server. And as you saw, I really bypassed the client-side validation. Okay. All right. So this is client-side protection. A better technique when you're protecting against XSS is to use client-side protection plus server-side protection. The client-side protection is really fast. It saves the server from handling multiple requests. So you don't go to server-side protection unless the client-side protection is bypassed, like by an attacker, for example. So in here, in this page, again, I'm gonna do SA less than. Okay, it's gonna tell me, hey, what is this? You cannot do that. So let's say I bypassed it in the same way I just showed you. Well, there is something in place on the server that will do exactly the same. And to show you that, I'm gonna remove, so I'm gonna go, remember, I'm the owner of this website. What was that page? The secure client server. XSS secure client server. So, where is it? Pattern. Removed. Okay. Save. Refresh. Okay. So I have the less than sign and it's not showing me red. That means it's not doing client-side validation. But look at what's happening. Only letters and white space allowed. So if I something valid, now it's allowing that. So let me, before I forget, go back and undo. Yep. All right, so this is it. I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and if you did, you can subscribe. Thank you so much. See you in the next lesson.